recording? I don't. Okay.
Okay, so I was saying maybe you other people have heard, but I just got an email from Dan who watches this on video, and it's an article from the Financial Times, and Putin signals acceptance of Finland and Sweden joining NATO. But, you know, a few caveats, no military equipment. And of course, we still got Turkey to worry about. But I'm wondering, has Putin blinked? Has anybody else seen this?
Yeah, it's on in Fortune as well.
Really? Wow.
That's been in the news.
Yeah, that is amazing though. Yeah, there's a lot happening in that guy's mind.
Yeah.
I think he's getting a lot of pushback too from some of the conservatives. They're starting to speak out too in Russia.
And one of his retired colonels said that doing Ukraine was a mistake in public.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh. Is he still around?
Right. I'm with you, Shiko. I think
I actually
depends on how long he'll be alive.
I think more of them too. It's not just him. I think people are starting to speak out. Yeah.
That's awesome. I've been working on tectonic plates, and I hadn't been paying much attention. I don't think we'll get to tectonic plates, but in California. But in any case, this is where he made the announcement, right? At this collective security treaty organization that he tried to get Ukraine to join in 2016. Well, that's really interesting. So thank you, Dan. I appreciate it. All right, back to Ukraine. I have an addendum. I ran across a bit of relevant information I thought I just had to add in. And it's in the context of 2013, kind of where we wound up last time. The letter of intent that Yankovic had signed, but Putin got him to backtrack on it and join the Commonwealth of Independent States. And there were protests. Putin tried to give Ukraine some money, and people said it's a bribe, it's a bailout, we're not going to accept it. And that's when that led to the Maidan. And Victoria Nuland going down with cookies and donuts for the protesters, which was quite controversial to mix in internal politics to that extent. And as I said, I think the analogy would have been if the Russian ambassador had gone to the Occupy protests on Wall Street. Things spiraled out of control. But the new bit of information that I ran into was the same Victoria Nuland, who was a kind of an ambassador at large for East Europe, right? So she technically was above the ambassador, this guy, Jeffrey Pyatt. Well, they were caught talking on the telephone and taped. And what they were talking about was grooming opposition leaders to complete what Putin calls a coup, right? So this looks bad. And the transcript, Pyatt says, so let me work on one of the guys, and you reach out to Yankovic, and then Nuland says, well, we'll try to get the UN, but fuck the EU. So she's a woman with salty language. But apparently there was a problem with the EU at that moment, which is interesting. And so the conversation goes on, and we want to try to get somebody with international personality to come out here and help midwife this thing. So they wanted somebody, international bigwig, to insert himself into this domestic political fight. And we need an attaboy to get the details to stick. So Biden's welling. Isn't that interesting? Now, Biden was vice president at the time, not president, but he was vice president, and he was willing, apparently, to insert himself. So this is something that I'm sure stuck in Putin's craw. And I thought it was relevant, so I went back and added it. By the way, if anybody's interested, I found very late in Fiona Hill's biography this wonderful chronology of Putin's life. It just goes into great detail. And I can, if anybody is interested in seeing that independently, I'd be glad to send it. So his whole life laid up. Now, the book was written in 2015, so it ends in 2014. And then we had a lot of discussion last time about the problem of getting the world on board with the United States and North America in sanctioning Putin. Now, it may be that Europe and North America are all that's needed, because that's almost 55, 60% of the economic power in the world. This combination is going to put a lot of pressure on Putin. But we're not getting much cooperation with other places in the world, except, of course, Australia and maybe Argentina. What this map shows is the degree of press freedom, the press freedom index. And we've been talking about this era that we're in, the era of the strong man, right? That Gabriel Rockman writes about in his new book. The problem that we're having is there's strongmen in all these red countries, dark red, that have pretty much taken over the press, and there is no press freedom. It's interesting that Mexico was listed as difficult. Of course, Venezuela is very serious, and this is in our hemisphere. And Peru is also difficult, and Mexico, you know, we're not surprised about Nicaragua or Venezuela or Cuba, but Mexico, really? So another interesting article in The Economist that it was in the culture section, and it's looking at a book that was written 100 years ago that I read when I was a student in Germany. I read it, tried to read it in German. I should read it again in English, but they point out this classic 100-year-old book, The Good Soldier Schweik, and the idiocy of war. And this guy did a great satire. I think he finished it in 1923, after just looking at World War I. And he picked this sort of goofy character who upsets the authorities by being so literal that he follows every order to the T, and it gets him into big trouble and it gets the authorities into trouble. It was a brilliant thing to do, and The Economist suggests that the Russian soldiers, since they're involved in a senseless war, should use the same tactics of Schweik, which is just to obey every command so completely that it's absurd. And the name Schweik lives on in the common parlance. In Eastern Europe, they have a word that's called sveiking, which is basically sabotaging or being subversive in sneaky ways to the authorities. And this shows Schweik just ambling along, always creating problems. It's sort of his tactic is a feigned stupidity that makes a mockery out of authority. And so Schweiking, and then it's really remained in the culture. The Hasek was a Czechoslovakian, so you get a lot of pubs that are called U Kalicha at the Chalice, which was the name of the pub that Schweik always attended. The Czechoslovakians were admonished during the Prague Spring, when the Soviet Union reacted and invaded. They were told, stop Schweiking. This isn't a joke. The Russian troops are here. It went over the Russians' head. They had no idea what was going on. But it's also quite contemporary. The current Prime Minister of Lithuania has quoted Schweik in recent speeches. So I think it's we spent a lot of time looking at Eastern Europe, and it is an important work of culture in Eastern Europe. And let's see if the Russian soldiers use it. The closest soulmate to Schweik that we have is Yossarian, the captain that was in Catch-22, who managed to be subversive and the chain of command. Okay, so I'll just stop for a second and see if there's anything more about Eastern Europe or the Ukraine specifically, or Russia or Putin, that anybody else wants to comment on.
This is Carol. I'm just wondering if anybody has any more details about those, the steel mill that got evacuated. Did they get evacuated into Russia? Did those soldiers get evacuated back into Western Ukraine? Does anybody know about that?
I don't.
No, I read that was happening, but I don't know where they're going.
Yeah.
Okay. More reading. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so on we go. I had arranged for a substitute speaker for Ramsey.
Excuse me. The LA Times says Ukrainian officials said that 264 firefighters were evacuated to Russia-held territory to the east, including 53 seriously wounded fighters who were taken to the hospital. And then they're negotiating a swap.
Oh, okay.
Thank
Wow,
you.
real time. I love this. This is what this is the way I want this group to evolve. Lovely. Thank you, Shigeko.
Oh, you're welcome.
Any other comments? So I'm just giving you guys a preview of who's going to be speaking for Ramsey on June 1st in the normal Wednesday, first Wednesday of the month slot at 7 at the church. He's a prehistoric archaeologist. And I met him on the trail. We bonded immediately. He lived in Singapore, and we're fascinated with Singapore, as is Ramsey. And so I told him about our group, and he said, well, you know, I do have a history lecture on the dichotomy between Europe and East Asia. Because I talked about the Silk Road, and that's what our current reading was. And he said, well, this might fit, but it's super prehistoric. It's lower Paleolithic. So I'm just fascinated what that dichotomy might be, as is Ramsey. So I'll tape our session this time for Ramsey. So anyway, June 1st at 7 p.m. Any questions? Okay. We spend a lot of time on COVID when in the early months, and we looked at the history of pandemics, and we looked at the history of immunizations, really starting with cowpox and use of that. But before cowpox, there was a kind of a scarification, a variolation that George Washington had used. So we've been involved in when we got to the vaccines, we got involved in talking about the mRNA, and Irene has always been a consultant for us. Shigeko, she's a virologist. And so I thought that there have been such interesting articles, a couple of them, that I thought, given our history of diving into COVID, I'd at least review them. And I don't know if y'all saw it. It was in the East Bay Times. It's available. The whole article's available on the Mercury News website. And what I liked about it was the graphics. Y'all know that I love pictures and images to make things clear. So for those of you who are visually oriented, I want to go through the graphics that were in this. But the bottom line, the contention is that Bay Area COVID policy has been so good. So we've been lucky to have lived in an enlightened area where this policy was implemented. And if the whole country had implemented it, instead of having 1 million people die, as we're approaching that number, only 350,000 would have died, and 651,000 lives would have been saved if the whole nation had benefited from the enlightened policies of the Bay Area. So let's look at the graphics for this. I like this. Each little dot represents 100 people. So this is a million Americans who are going will have died quite soon. And so let's ask ourselves, what would have happened to this million if the United States had the same death rate as California? Not the Bay Area, but California as a whole has more problems than the Bay Area for, demographic reasons, probably Latinos in the Central Valley, et cetera. But still, California did better than average. So if the whole country had instituted Californian policies, 241,000 fewer people would have died, would have been saved, and that's just California. But what about the Bay Area? That's what I'm touting, and this visualizes the first statistic that I gave you, so you can see it, and it's impressive. So here's another graphic, and this just shows another way to get at that number, looking at it state by state. And so this is the average of 1 million deaths when you average all the states together. And these are the states that make the rate higher, so they're in excess of the average. And these are the states that bring the number down because they are less. I think this is California. It's not labeled, but here's the Bay Area, and it just shows you how well we've done. And this is just another way of saying how we get to that 350,000 people who saved. So this is the rate by county. Whoops, I need to size this, sorry. So looking at all the counties in the country, and now the metric is the number of deaths, cumulative deaths, so all deaths all told since the beginning of the pandemic per 100,000 people. So you're comparing oranges to oranges. And the county, the best county in the country is San Mateo. And in fourth place is Alameda, and unlabeled is Contra Costa, our very own Contra Costa. Other California counties are in here: San Diego, Orange, Fresno. Fresno's pretty close to the average, though. I'm not sure which county is worse. So that's another interesting metric. And why are we better? Because our vaccination rate is 15% higher than the country as a whole. And after we were vaccinated. So instead of looking just at the total period since the beginning of the pandemic, but since the vaccines came out and people who were going to get vaccinated got vaccinated, our death rate fell by a factor of 4. And so that's an important statistic as we look. And so this looks at the percent of the population that's fully vaccinated. So now we're not measuring COVID, we're measuring the treatment, we're measuring the how compliant the population is with getting vaccinated. And just as we expect, San Mateo is near the top, third in the country. Alameda looks 6th, maybe Contra Costa 7th, something like that. So And this is all the counties in the country, over 3,000 counties. So we are lucky to live in an enlightened place. I don't have, I'm sorry, Shigeko, I don't have haven't pointed to the direct statistics of Los Angeles County.
It was there, Johnny. It says Los Angeles County. It's on there.
Okay, where was it?
It's in there under Wake County, North Carolina, Los Angeles County.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you. And it looks like LA County is better than average on being immunized. So that's good, as is Orange County. Okay, thank you. So now, however, so I get all these slides made, and I look at today at the New York Times California Today section, and the headline is "Why Bay Area Has the State's Highest COVID Rates." And I'm going, whoa, wait a minute. That's the opposite of what the slides I made last night showed. So I looked a little bit deeper there in here, and I think there's some insights that are important. Because we don't have much herd immunity from actually getting the virus, we may be a little bit more susceptible. A lot of populations, I mean, the sweet spot is populations who get the virus and get immunized. Then you have double immunity. So, but we've been so good and so careful that we don't have much herd immunity from the contracting the actual disease. So when we drop our guard and stop wearing our masks, we pay the price. But it's because of our past success. Now, mask requirements are back in for BART, but there's no, the health officers aren't returning to mandates. They're relying instead and telling people to get rapid tests. They're not checking immunization status at Warriors basketball games, by the way, which there'll be a lot of people yelling at Chase Center over the next couple of weeks. And yelling in inside is not good. Let's hope Chase has good ventilation.
So does that mean that it's better to get COVID and therefore your immunity is higher?
Yes, but you wouldn't do that intentionally. This is only in retrospect. You wouldn't roll the dice and get COVID, but after the fact, if you survived COVID and you're immunized, you're probably in a stronger position. Aiko, we have a friend who is actually a professor of pulmonology at UCSF, was in my class, and we're good friends. And he got COVID recently, and he made the comment that now I'm really super immune. So yeah, and he's in a position to evaluate that claim, and he made that claim. So yes. But that's different than saying, hey, go out and get COVID, because you might be the unlucky people who'd wind up in the ICU or even dying. So the same phenomenon of people who've been really compliant and doing well and have avoided COVID in the past and now they're exposed to Omicron. And Omicron's different. And it spreads more easily. And look at South Korea. This is their case rate. It's gone through the roof, and it's because of what I was just talking about. They've been good. They've been wearing masks. They've been social distancing. And now Omicron's around, and they're letting their guard down, and they're getting cases. But they're not dying. Let me rephrase that. There's no evidence with this surge that there's any more hospitalizations or death in the Bay Area. What concerns me a little bit is when you go from this graph to this graph, where we're going from cases to deaths, you do have a spike in South Korea. And so then the question is, well, wait a minute, is South Korea immunized as well as the Bay Area? And we'll answer that. But before I leave here, I just want to point out another couple of another spike in Hong Kong. Terrible spike, twice as bad. And I cannot figure out what's going on in Hong Kong and China itself, because when you look at Hong Kong, their immunization rate, especially for 80-year-olds, elderly, is terrible. It's terrible. And you'd think that authoritarian administrations would see to it that their people are immunized. So that's Hong Kong. Back to South Korea. They're pretty well immunized. It looks like 90%. And this is the number of doses. We don't see 4 doses here. And there's, of course, a lot of people in the Bay Area, including Aiko and me, and I think most of us have had 4 doses. But still 90% with 3 doses, at least in this age range. So maybe the deaths are coming down here. I don't know, but
South Korea getting the Chinese one or ours?
Okay, I'm glad you asked. Here's what South Korea is getting.
Okay, so they're not getting the Chinese.
No, but Hong Kong is.
Yeah.
Hong Kong's getting Sinovac, looks like about 40% of the time, but plus the fact that that they don't have it. So this may be playing a role in the fact that they're not immunized. But it doesn't seem to be playing a huge role in South Korea. I think the whole thing is the number of doses, and we don't see anybody with 4. Anyway, this gave me pause, and I stopped feeling secure and happy when this news came this morning. So,
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Is China, the rest of China, getting as many Pfizer BioNTech vaccines like Hong Kong? Or is it
No.
just, okay.
No.
How come Hong Kong gets our stuff more?
Because of where they are and the connections and the high number of elite families in Hong Kong, I'm going to guess. There's more. I think they can travel more. So I don't know in detail. Okay, and then the second article looks at the 5 dimensions of the pandemic, which I think given all the yelling and screaming and polarization, if everybody just took a breath and said, well, which dimension are you looking at when we talk about policy? Because the policy maybe needs to be a bit different. And I thought I'd go through at least the first one in more detail. The statistics with the maturity of the pandemic. So out of the gate, when we didn't know anything about the COVID, New York really took the brunt of the deaths, and New Jersey, just because of the crowded areas in these large cities. So that's the first wave. And then as it proceeded over the following few months, still New York and still New Jersey, Massachusetts is up there. But all this is because of the density issue in cities. And then you move on to the next phase, which was the winter surge. Massachusetts is at the top, but now you get Illinois, the Midwest, you get Arizona. So it varies in which wave you're in, and then Delta hits, and now you're getting the South. Fewer people perhaps in Georgia, but now Delta is more communicable, and California comes up. Been pretty low before, but now with Delta, we're rising, and so this takes us up to a year ago, and then you get Omicron. And here's New York, they're back because of the cities, they're so communicable. And California rises as well. So that is my COVID wrap. Does anybody have any COVID questions or comments?
The East Coast got it from Europe, right?
Right.
I mean, it was transmitted through Europe.
Right.
And they got it before we did, didn't they?
Yes.
Yeah. So
although I think we had sporadic early cases in
Washington and
in that nursing home in Washington.
Yeah.
And then in Silicon Valley. So Santa Clara was the first. Their health officer, Sarah Cody, was the first one that I'd heard about that started talking about social distancing. I'm not sure New York was instituted that right away, and that might have been the problem. And frankly, it's harder to do that in New York because of the subways and the density and everything else. But I remember when Sarah Cody issued the order to social distance and to not have groups of more than 10 people inside. And I thought, what's that about? And then as we've read more about social distancing and the history of social distancing, that's interesting. It's laid out in Premonition, the Michael Lewis first draft of history of the COVID pandemic that we're in. And I highly recommend it. And so he looked at the history. Where did social distancing come from? It was never a recommendation, but of all the people who you've got to credit, it's George W. Bush. And Lewis lays out how in the bird flu, when that happened during W. Bush's second term, he had met and he said, "My God, we dodged that bullet. Who around here knows what our pandemic plan was?" And there wasn't one. And so he said, "Well, they had a huge pandemic 100 years ago. Who knows about that?" And somebody said, "Well, we can give you a book, sir." And they got him the book that was written in the 1990s about the Spanish flu. And George Bush read it and said, "Well, that's interesting. Huh, we got to avoid that. We got to be prepared if there's something that bad." So he set up a task force, and he gave the task force a lot of money and a lot of freedom. And Michael Lewis meets different people that were on the task force, and he's very good at rooting out interesting people and giving their background and their wisdom and maybe kind of idiosyncrasies that make them interested in exploring something. And one of them on the task force said, let's go back and look at the Spanish flu in more detail. And they went and they got old newspapers and they got all the public health data that they could find. And they discovered among this massive data that there was a striking difference in the initial mortality between two cities, Philadelphia and St. Louis. I'm pretty sure it was St. Louis. And they said, well, that's interesting. And then they went to the newspapers and they went to the documents, and they found out that for some reason, the administrators in St. Louis said, let's try social distancing. So it was really those administrators 100 years ago that played with this idea. And there was a marked difference. Philadelphia had no social distance and St. Louis did. So the recommendation of the task force was that social distancing from now on be part of the emergency response to try to keep a pandemic from going wildly out of control, like it did in Italy, like it did in the Queens in New York. That's the history of social distancing that is transmitted by Michael Lewis, and I do recommend that book, Premonition. Okay. Any other comments about COVID?
This is a medical question. How long does are they saying the second booster lasts? Do they know for sure, or?
Not long. I think that I can't give you exact numbers, but there was sufficient waning that it became standard to get a booster at 6 months. And that is the normal. That is normal for immunizations. If you look at a series, an immunization series, you get one or two, depending on measles, you get one, and then you get a repeat in 6 months. With diphtheria and tetanus, you get an initial series of 3 and then boosters. So this series of 1 to 3 or as a part of your initial series with a booster following on 6 to 12 months later, that's standard. That's standard. And you would expect COVID to be exactly the same. Now, will it in the future, if we want to immunize a new population, will it be 2 and a third one in 6 months? Well, we need more data. You know, it might be 3. It might be 1 and a booster in 3 months. We don't know, but for sure, yeah, you'll need a booster months later, just to remind the memory cells that, hey, you know, you guys got to be ready to pump out antibodies. Don't dismantle those machines yet. And that's what we call the fluid immunity. There's also cell immunity. And if you've had even 1 shot, you do have some cells that are capable of responding and rousing, but it may take a while. And so that may be where we are now with people who are partially immune or haven't had their 4th shot. And when they're initially exposed, they're not able to make pump out the immediate antibodies. They need to prime the machines and mobilize the supply chain so you get everything to go into the antibody making machine before they pump out antibodies, which means that you may get that bad cold, even a sore throat, but you don't get the virus going any deeper than that, because it takes a while to get down to the lungs. And by the time it gets to the lungs, the cell immunity kicks in. And the cell immunity is what keeps, even if we get COVID, will keep us out of the ICU and keep us from dying. Now, is that 100%? No. And you do hear about, unfortunately, people like us who get that damn Omicron and do go on and progress. But the likelihood of that, we saw in the Bay Area as a whole, it's 4 times less risk of dying. But in individuals, when the statistics, you look at an individual's chance, there's probably only 1/10 the chance of dying if you're well immunized, depending on the study. So did that answer your question?
Yeah. Yes. Thank you so much, John. That was good. That's great.
Okay.
Question.
Yeah.
In Lewis's book Premonition, in Santa Barbara, there was that woman doctor, and she was kind of right on top of it, right?
Right.
But how did Santa Barbara in those other graphs fare? Obviously, the population is different from, say, the Bay Area, but how did Santa Barbara do?
I don't know, and of course that woman is no longer there. She got recruited by the state, yeah, and so she got recruited by the state. Santa Barbara does have a Hispanic Latino population. And that probably muddies the water. I mean, the Bay Area does too, right out in Brentwood. But it seems like, at least the way Lewis described Santa Barbara, it sounded like they had more people at risk. Okay, anything else? Well, all our topics took us all the way to the horizon, and I guess we don't have time for California. So we'll wait until next week. I suppose I could show just, I've got a couple of minutes. Let me give you a tease. Anybody mind if I go back for a second with a tease?
No.
No, go for it.
Okay. You see that? Does that come up?
No, you've got COVID on there.
Yeah, okay. No, I just wanted to make sure. All right. How did California get its name? Anybody?
Khalifa.
Very good. And who was Khalifa?
I forgot.
Well, if you go over to the Mark Hopkins Hotel, and ask, the concierge will tell you where the mural of Khalifa is. And Calafia, I should say, was the fictional queen of the island of California, the mythic island. And it's from this novel about chivalry by Montalvo, 16th century. The adventures, there was an adventurer who winds up on Khalifa. And so Khalifa ruled over a kingdom of black women, so that we're dealing with a kind of Amazon story. And they sailed away from their island, their paradise, with a large flock of trained griffins. And this is the way, remember, we're medieval here, and this is the way you rolled back in medieval times. So you got to go with your trained griffins. And then you join Muslims to fight against Christians. There being so much friction in those days. Constantinople had just fallen 50 years before and was now Istanbul, the Ottomans having thrown out the Orthodox Christians. And so she's initially fighting with the Muslims against the Christians. But so the Christians capture her, and she converts to Christianity and marries a Christian, and she takes her army. I guess they all convert, and returns to her beautiful paradise of California to await further adventures. So that's the end of my introduction to California.
That happened before. I mean, what year is that? That's like
That was 15. The book was written in 1510.
boy, that's pretty fantastical.
Yep, fantastical. So we live in a place that's named for a fantastical fictional character, and some people would say that's appropriate.
except that they didn't even know that California existed.
Nope.
No, so somebody had read the book and had decided that they should name this new
Yeah.
city.
So, Coronado made it up from Mexico City in 1540
Mhm.
to the southwest, and including California. We will find when we get to Coronado in our history, maybe we'll find more details on the naming of California. So something to look forward to, but it's going to be a while.
I know that we have to go many hundreds of years.
Yes, we do.
Thank you, John. That's great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
John. See you guys all next week.
See you next
Okay.
week.
See you next week.
Great.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
You.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.